Where did Liverpool go from Jurgen Klopp? In this video, we're going to talk about the three big contenders of who should replace the German when he leaves at the end of the season. These options are pretty obvious, but I think some managerial debates, when they leave, it can be 5, 10, 50 nominations. All could be the next manager. It makes a lot of sense in those clubs. But for Liverpool, I think we're in a situation where only a few can really fit the bill in terms of their experience, in terms of where Liverpool go as a football club. There aren't many that can do the role of what Jurgen Klopp is doing anyway, let alone having to take his project on, which he's still mid-project. That's the beauty of what he's done with these young players coming through the transfers this summer. He's still mid-project, so the next manager has to have a philosophical approach that aligns to Jurgen Klopp, and then he has to have the weight of the club on his shoulders, and he has to be able to manage that. So it says a lot about how Jurgen Klopp is such a dominating force at Liverpool. There's only a couple that can really match his gravitas, in my opinion. So we're going to run through pros and cons. Very keen to see what you think in the comments down below. It's a bit like when maybe Mourinho left Chelsea and it was like, who's going to replace him? Same with Ferguson as well. There will be a bit of a narrative now for the next 3 or 4 months. I doubt anything will get confirmed until the end of the season, because of, I think maybe if Liverpool were mid-table and really struggling, it'd be a different narrative. And maybe we would have kind of a pre-contract agreement a little bit kind of gossiped about in the media. I think if Alonso was to come and a few others that I'm going to talk about in this video, it's not going to be announced until the season's over, because Liverpool can win so many trophies this season. They could win a quadruple and send him off in unbelievable style. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. We're going to break down the first one. Pep Linders. Now, this has got the most pros in terms of the philosophical approach, because he's worked with these players, he knows them in and out. Obviously, he's released books and material sort of talking about the process of him and Klopp and what they've done together. That will be interesting to FSG. There's no question about that. And there will be some thought process that Jurgen Klopp's left. If we take a left turn and bring in a manager that maybe doesn't like a certain group of players or doesn't want to use the youth or whatever, then suddenly we're going to have to spend loads of money to compete, and we go back to where Liverpool might have been pre-Jurgen Klopp, and that would be an absolute disaster for FSG if they get it wrong. So they'll be sat there in the boardroom thinking, why don't we just carry on with the golden goose and get his mate over, the golden duck? And Pep Linders might be the golden duck. It might be. It's hard with assistant managers because we don't know their ability to lead. We don't know what he's like when Klopp isn't there. We don't know what he's like managing games when Klopp maybe was on the touchline. Obviously, we've got a couple of examples in the last 7 years, I think, certainly in pre-season as well, and obviously at Melwood in the training ground. But apart from that, it's like, what happens if you're, Liverpool being the Champions League next season? What happens if you're 3-0 down to Real Madrid in the quarterfinals of the Champions League? Like, has Pep Linders got the experience to manage that situation? Because what Klopp does in terms of in-game management, we've seen it this season in terms of the amount of substitutions he uses and how they impact the game. One that comes to mind is obviously Crystal Palace away for Liverpool was instrumental in how he changed the game. It's all well and good being philosophically aligned. I can be philosophically aligned to Pep Guardiola. I could read his book, or I could read any of their books about Guardiola, or Tifo YouTube channel about the genius of what Guardiola did. Then I'm on a touchline and then I make a decision. That could still be the same decision that Guardiola made. But then I've got to be the gravitas. The players have to look at me as a person of weight, of substance, to be able to deliver what I believe on the pitch. Does Pep Linders have that? He will initially, but that wanes very, very quickly. Look how many managers that have come in and just don't have the aura about them. I think about Bolton Wanderers when they got rid of Sam Allardyce. I know it's a ridiculous comparison, but they had that. Was it Sammy Lee? And he's kind of there, and he's like, mate, what's he doing there? Like Terry Connor at Wolves when what's his name left? So Mick McCarthy, that's it. Sometimes the assistant managers can align on every principle at the training ground in terms of transfers. They might look the part, but there's a very, very special ingredient that there's only 2 world-class managers, three world-class managers go in. That's Ancelotti, Jurgen Klopp, and Pep Guardiola. And then there's a separate bracket for Guardiola and Klopp, in my opinion, because I still think they're in their prime. Maybe Tuchel can get there a little bit, and maybe Nagelsmann as well as young managers. Ancelotti's just a little bit older, with all due respect. So there's 1% of the 1% of managers that can do it, and that'll be the issue for Pep Linders. But I think he's the favourite. I really think he's the favourite over Xabi Alonso. Now, let's talk about Xabi Alonso because he's tearing it up in Bundesliga. The approach for Bayer Leverkusen in terms of how they play football, it's closer to Guardiola, I'd say, than Jurgen Klopp from what I've seen of Leverkusen highlights. And that might be interesting to FSG because they might look at the Man City model and think, Jurgen Klopp is a unicorn manager. It's hard to get someone that can get your side pressing as hard as they do, working hard off the ball. Guardiola has a very similar approach. He doesn't get credited for the amount of work rate he gets out of his players, but the number one focus for Guardiola is obviously total football, beautiful passages of play on the ball. De Zerbi's a disciple. You could say someone like Eddie Howe, Thomas Frank's a disciple. Ten Hag was meant to be a disciple a little bit. There's probably 50 managers in European football that have kind of come from the Guardiola school of thought, obviously derived from Johan Cruyff himself. Jurgen Klopp is I think his philosophy is unto himself a little bit. So where I go with this is that Alonso comes in and he makes Liverpool a ball-playing side back to being a little bit more possession-based, which means they get the aesthetic quality. FSG would get the aesthetic quality of what Xabi Alonso would bring. It'd be more beautiful football. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp was obviously leaning towards that when he brought in Thiago Alcantara, for example. I don't think it ever quite worked out. So maybe FSG look and think we can take a little bit of a change here and bring in someone with a philosophy on the ball a little bit more than Jurgen Klopp. And that means that if then Alonso were to leave in 3, 4, 5 years after that, we can get in another manager that comes from the school of thought. All I'm saying is there aren't many Jurgen Klopps in the world, and there are a few more Guardiola and Guardiola lights. That might be an aspect for Liverpool Football Club to think about. I think my cons would be that he's managing in the German league. We just don't know. I think the German league's close to the Dutch league a little bit in terms of it being a coin flip when they come out of that league. We just don't know. Thomas Tuchel, exceptional. Then he floundered a little bit and struggled in his first season under Todd Bowley, gets sacked. So we don't have great evidence there long term of Thomas Tuchel, whether that's for right or for wrong. A few other examples as well where we don't know. I mean, when Guardiola left Bayern Munich, there were people questioning his time in Germany because he didn't win the Champions League. Multiple semi-final appearances wasn't good enough in that regard for sure. But there are people doubting what he did at Bayern Munich. People were doubting Ancelotti when he went to Bayern Munich, saying that wasn't great, and his career was a little bit flat. Went to Napoli, went to Everton as well. So the German league might be all well and good on Twitter highlights and seeing Alonso. He looks the part, and that would be a pro for Liverpool fans as well. Liverpool are a club steeped in history. The reason that Steven Gerrard is continually linked to the job, even though he's definitely not good enough for it, in my opinion, is because of how big he is in the city, how big the connection is between the fans and the locality of the football club. And Xabi Alonso being a Champions League winning midfielder for Liverpool will matter more than it does at other clubs. That'll be huge. But look at Seedorf going to AC Milan and Gattuso and loads of other players. Club legends don't always equal success. I think Alonso's done more than that, and he's more than just a name. He's applied a very, very interesting philosophical approach to Bayer Leverkusen. His time, I think it was at Sociedad and Real Madrid juniors, I think it was. But it is a gamble, the German league. There's no question about it. And then the third and final option, if you made it this far, make sure you subscribe, is obviously De Zerbi. He is third in the ranking. I think he's just above, I think he's in the 8-to-1s kind of category for the bookmakers. This would be a mixture of both approaches on some level, because De Zerbi would be a continuation for Liverpool in terms of having a manager that is managed in the Premier League. And he's got Brighton far in the FA Cup, which relatively is a great achievement. Far in Europe so far, obviously. We'll wait to see what they do in the Europa League. So De Zerbi's got experience in the league, which I think matters a lot ahead of Alonso. I really do. His approach is philosophically aligned to Alonso, aligned to Guardiola as well. Obviously, De Zerbi's been linked to the Man City job if Guardiola were to leave. Kind of think even Guardiola's come out and said that he'd be the one to replace me. I think something along those lines. So De Zerbi is ready for that big job. He's not going to go to Spurs. Does he go to Man United? Doesn't make sense to me. Maybe he goes to Chelsea. I can see the Brighton-Chelsea thing going on. So if we agree that De Zerbi's there for a big move, he's ready to get at that big job. Klopp leaves in 6 months. De Zerbi has a great run out with Brighton. that would make a lot of sense. He's managing the Premier League. He'd have access to a couple of incredible Brighton talents. That usually happens when a big manager leaves. Someone like Evan Ferguson at Liverpool. Imagine that. Even Estupiñán, for example. Some of these fantastic players that Brighton have got, the youth. He could take them over as well. Not saying it would necessarily work, but having that Premier League history, having the philosophical approach that would align to what FSG want to take the club forward, I think would be a very, very interesting approach. And don't write off De Zerbi in the shout for Liverpool. I think he's a lot closer than football fans would give him credit for. So very keen to what you think in the comments down below. Who will be the next manager? Where do they go from here? I'll see you very, very soon.